Welcome to VSOW, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into something that, well, really touches almost everyone now. The ethics behind social media design. We're looking at how it affects our self-control, our well-being.
Yeah,
It's huge.
it really is. And we've got some solid ground to cover this. We're drawing from Ethics of the Attention Economy, The Problem of Social Media Addiction. That's from Business Ethics Quarterly by Bhargava and Velasquez.
Right, a hefty piece. And we're balancing that with insights on what we can do, from self-control in the digital age, provided by the Alliance for Decision Education.
So the mission today is really to pull out the key stuff from these sources, get into the moral arguments, and also look at practical ways, strategies for navigating this digital world we're all in.
Exactly. So let's peel back those layers. Where do we start? I guess with defining the problem.
Yeah, that's the essential starting point. The core issue, as Pargava and Velasquez really lay it out, isn't just that these platforms are, engaging or fun. Their argument is stronger. They are deliberately designed to foster addiction.
Deliberately designed. That's a strong claim.
It is, and it's not just an academic point. Governments, the World Health Organization, they're talking about excessive internet use as a major public health concern. So this is a recognized global issue.
That's a really important distinction, isn't it? Because usually when we think social media problems, our minds jump to, like, cyberbullying or maybe fake news, polarization.
Right, all serious things.
Definitely serious.
Right.
But this argument goes deeper. It says the problem isn't just how people misuse the platforms, but the design itself, the very way they're built.
Exactly. And that raises different ethical questions. It's not quite like, say, alcohol or cigarettes where the product is addictive, but the user chooses to consume it. Here, the argument is the environment itself is engineered to hook you.
So the moral responsibility shifts, or at least expands, to the creators of that environment.
Precisely. And the engine driving that, this is what they call the attention economy business model. This is fundamental.
Okay, break that down. Attention economy.
So think about most businesses. You buy a coffee, you pay for the coffee, you subscribe to a streaming service, you pay the subscription fee. Simple enough.
Right. Direct transaction.
But with many big social media platforms, you, the user, aren't the direct customer paying the bills. Instead, your attention, the time you spend scrolling, clicking, watching, that's the product.
Ah, okay. So my eyeballs are the commodity.
Pretty much. Your attention is gathered, packaged, and then sold to advertisers or data brokers or other interested parties.
So if I'm Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, my goal isn't necessarily to make the user happy or fulfilled, but to keep their attention for as long as possible.
Right.
To maximize the product I can sell.
You've hit the nail on the head. That model creates this incredibly strong incentive, almost an imperative for these companies to design features that maximize engagement, that keep you coming back, keep you scrolling.
Even if that engagement slides into addictive territory or has other negative consequences.
Exactly. It creates a potential conflict between the platform's business goals and the user's well-being. It's baked into the model.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a powerful incentive structure. So how widespread is this addiction issue, really? Do we have numbers?
Well, the research field is still evolving, and different studies use different methods, so the exact numbers can vary. But the overall picture is pretty clear. It seems to be a significant global issue.
You see things like one study mentioning 59% of U.S. users feeling addicted. Another in Nigeria found 27% of students felt that way. Now, feeling addicted is subjective, of course.
True, self-reports have limitations, but then you have studies using more validated diagnostic tools. For instance, one found 12% addiction rates in Chinese college students. Another showed 8.6% among young people in Peru.
And I saw one figure from India among students that was strikingly high, something like 36.9%.
Yeah, that study by Masti and colleagues was quite arresting. So even if the exact percentages differ depending on the population and the measurement tool, the consistent takeaway is this isn't a niche problem. It affects young people, adults, across different cultures. It's just a real vulnerability to these design techniques.
Okay, so it's real, it's widespread. Let's get into the how.
Yeah.
How do these platforms actually hook us? What are these design tactics?
Right. This draws heavily on behavioral psychology. One of the most powerful techniques is variable reinforcement, or sometimes called intermittent reinforcement.
Variable reinforcement. Sounds technical.
It's actually simple in concept, but incredibly effective. It means rewards don't come predictably. Sometimes you get a reward, sometimes you don't, and you don't know when it's coming. Think slot machines.
Okay.
Yeah.
You pull the lever, maybe you win, maybe you don't. That keeps people playing.
Exactly.
Mm.
And social media uses digital versions of this. Remember the Twitter Blue loading screen, that little bird flapping?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like it takes forever.
Well, one argument is that slight variable delay isn't just lag. It might be a subtle way to create an intermittent reward. You wait an unpredictable amount of time, and then you get the new tweets. That makes the arrival of content feel more rewarding.
Huh. That's sneaky. What else?
Pinterest's design is another example. You know how when you scroll, sometimes you see just the top of the next image cut off at the bottom of the screen?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It makes you want to scroll just a little bit more to see the whole thing.
Precisely. It's a visual tease, a variable reward. You get a glimpse, creating curiosity, encouraging that endless scrolling behavior. It's always hinting at something more just out of view.
And the pull to refresh feature, that feels very slot machine-like.
Absolutely. Several writers like Tristan Harris have made that direct comparison. You perform an action pulling down and you get an unpredictable reward. Sometimes lots of new notifications and posts, sometimes just one or two, sometimes nothing exciting. That variability is key to maintaining the behavior.
Okay, so variable rewards keep us pulling the lever, digitally speaking. What other tactics are at play?
Another huge one is tapping into our social needs and reward systems. Our desire for validation, connection, reciprocity.
Like Snapchat streaks. I hear those are a big deal for teens.
A massive deal. The pressure to maintain a daily exchange with friends just to keep that streak number going. It creates this obligation, this low-level anxiety about breaking the chain and letting someone down. It forces daily engagement.
That sounds stressful.
It can be. And then there's the classic example, the Facebook like button. It seems so simple, but scholars like Adam Alter argue it fundamentally changed how people use the platform.
How so?
It turned posting into a performance. You put something out there and then you wait, you check, you crave those little thumbs up notifications. It's a direct hit of social validation, and it's variable too. You don't know how many likes you'll get. Most platforms now have some version of this.
Yeah, likes, hearts, reactions.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. So variable rewards, social validation. What's the third leg of this stool?
The third key tactic is the erosion of natural stopping cues.
Ah.
Basically, removing the things that used to tell us, okay, you're done now.
Like the end of a page in a book or the end of a newspaper article.
Exactly. Or even just the bottom of a web page before infinite scroll took over. You'd reach the end, maybe click next page, but there was a pause, a moment where you could think, do I want to keep going or should I do something else?
But infinite scroll gets rid of that pause.
Completely. New content just keeps loading automatically as you scroll down. There's no endpoint. It removes that opportunity for conscious decision-making about whether to continue or stop. It makes it much, much easier to just keep going.
It's like the digital equivalent of a bottomless bowl of chips. You just keep eating because it never feels like you're finishing.
That's a great analogy. It removes the friction, the natural stopping points that allow for reflection and self-control.
Okay, so these design tactics, variable reinforcement, social rewards, removing stopping cues, are powerful and pervasive. We've established it's widespread. Now let's circle back to the ethics. Why is addicting users considered morally impermissible? The sources lay out 3 arguments, right?
That's right, 3 distinct moral arguments. The first, and probably the most straightforward, is the harm argument.
Okay. What kind of harm are we talking about?
A really wide range, unfortunately. There's evidence linking social media addiction to poorer academic performance, lower grades.
Makes sense. Hard to study if you're constantly distracted.
Right. And similarly, poor work performance in adults. But the mental health links are particularly concerning. Studies show correlations between heavy social media use and unhappiness, increased depression.
I've definitely seen headlines about that. Is it just correlation, though? Maybe unhappy people just use social media more?
That's the crucial question, correlation versus causation. But the sources highlight longitudinal and experimental studies that suggest it's not just correlation. Some studies followed people over time and found that addictive social media use predicted later depressive symptoms, but depressive symptoms didn't necessarily predict later addiction. The arrow seemed to point from social media use to negative mental health outcomes.
Interesting. So the use came first, then the decline in well-being.
In those studies, yes. And other research looked at what happens when people quit Facebook. Those experiments found that quitting led to fewer depressive symptoms and higher life satisfaction compared to control groups who kept using it.
Wow. Okay, so that strengthens the causal argument considerably. The addiction seems to be driving the harm.
The evidence points strongly in that direction. And to really understand the moral weight of these harms, Pargava and Velasquez use Martha Nussbaum's capabilities approach.
Nussbaum. That's about fundamental human capabilities needed for a dignified life, right?
Exactly. Things like life, bodily health, senses, imagination, thought, emotions, practical reason, affiliation, play, the basic building blocks of a flourishing human life. And the argument is that social media addiction directly undermines several of these core capabilities.
How so? Give me some examples.
Okay, take life. Studies link internet addiction to increased suicidal ideation, planning, even attempts. That's a direct assault on the most fundamental capability.
That's incredibly serious.
It is. Or bodily health. We mentioned the link to lower physical health, maybe higher BMI from being sedentary. Senses, imagination, and thought. Just having a smartphone nearby, even off, can decrease cognitive capacity. Addiction impairs focus, concentration, memory, hindering your ability to think deeply.
So it literally makes it harder to think straight.
The evidence suggests so. Then emotions. Increased anxiety, higher rates of loneliness despite being connected. Practical reason, the ability to plan your life, make good decisions. Addiction clearly impairs self-control. You know you're spending too much time, but you can't stop.
Right, that loss of control.
Affiliation. It can displace real-world, face-to-face interaction, leading to weaker social ties and more loneliness, paradoxically, and even play. Less time for hobbies, sports, recreation, and potentially less enjoyment even when you do them.
So, looking at it through that capabilities lens, it's not just feeling bad, it's undermining the very foundations of a good human life.
That's the argument. These harms are morally significant because they violate these fundamental entitlements.
Okay, that's a powerful harm argument. What's the second moral objection?
The second is what they call the demeaning argument. This is described as an added insult on top of the harm.
An added insult. How?
The idea is that social media companies involve the user in the very process that makes the platform more addictive for that specific user.
Wait, how do they involve me?
Through your data. Every click, every second you linger on a post, that's data. They collect it, analyze it with sophisticated algorithms, and use it to tailor the feed, the ads, the notifications specifically for you to make it even better at grabbing and holding your attention.
So, I'm essentially providing the raw material that they use to make the trap more effective for me personally.
That's the core of the demeaning argument. You're not just a target, you're an unwitting collaborator in your own manipulation.
That feels icky.
Yeah.
Like being used against yourself.
Exactly. And the authors argue this is worse than simple paternalism, where someone might override your choices for your own good. Here, they argue, the company's actions express that your interests, your well-being, simply do not matter at all compared to their goal of engagement. It's a fundamental lack of respect.
A paradigmatic instance of disrespect, so they put it, okay? That adds another layer of wrongness.
And the third argument.
The third is the exploitation argument. Exploitation generally means taking unfair advantage of someone's vulnerability for your own gain.
But isn't some exploitation okay? Like exploiting a loophole in the rules in a game, or exploiting a weakness in an opponent's argument.
Right. Not all exploitation is considered morally wrong. The philosophical debate is complex, but wrongful exploitation often involves disrespect and, crucially, harm. Pargava and Velasquez argue social media addiction is an easier case because it clearly harms the exploited party, undermining those capabilities we just discussed.
So the harm makes the exploitation clearly wrongful. Yes. And what makes it particularly insidious is that the internet is so essential to modern life. For work, school, staying connected, it's almost impossible to opt out entirely. This creates what they call an inescapable vulnerability for many users. We have to be online to participate in society.
Which makes us vulnerable to platforms designed to exploit our attention once we're there.
Precisely. They leverage our need to be connected to subject us to these potentially harmful, addictive designs.
Okay, those three arguments, harm, demeaning, exploitation, paint a pretty damning ethical picture of the design practices. It feels a bit bleak. But there is another side to this, right? What about individual agency? What can we do?
Absolutely. It's not just about what platforms do to us. The Alliance for Decision Education Source focuses on the other side, cultivating self-control in the digital age.
Self-control. Sounds essential, but maybe easier said than done.
Definitely. But it's crucial for making decisions that align with our long-term goals, rather than just reacting impulsively. One big hurdle is a cognitive bias called hyperbolic discounting.
Hyperbolic discounting. Sounds like a math problem.
Ha, kind of. It's our built-in tendency to value immediate rewards much more highly than future rewards, even if the future reward is much bigger or better. The small, instant hit of checking a notification often feels more compelling than the long-term benefit of focused work.
Yeah, I can relate to that. The short-term brain wins out sometimes.
Often,
Yeah.
especially now, the digital age makes this internal battle harder. Phones, tablets, laptops are everywhere, in classrooms, at home, constant access to potential distractions.
And even when people know they should be focusing,
Yeah.
like students in class, the pull is strong. You mentioned studies showing huge numbers using phones during lectures.
Yeah, figures like 70% to 90% of undergrads admitting to it. And even when monitored, a big chunk of online time in class gets spent on non-academic stuff. Social media, shopping, games.
Wow, so just telling people don't do it isn't really working.
It seems not. Which leads to rethinking the whole idea of willpower. We often think of self-control as just gritting your teeth and resisting temptation through sheer mental force.
The just say no approach.
Exactly. But research suggests that pure willpower is often not enough. It can be draining, and it might not even be the most effective strategy.
Really? So what does work?
Studies show that people who score high on self-control aren't necessarily better at resisting temptation moment to moment. Instead, they're better at setting up their lives and habits to avoid temptation in the first place.
Ah, so they're playing a different game. Not fighting the urge, but preventing it from arising so often.
Precisely. One study even found that effortful self-control, that white knuckling, was completely unrelated to achieving goals. It's more about smart habits and strategies. We need a bigger toolbox than just willpower.
Okay, so what's in this toolbox? What are these effective strategies?
We can group them into two main types: cognitive strategies, changing how we think, and situational strategies, changing our environment.
Let's start with cognitive. How can changing my thinking help?
A key concept is metacognition. That basically means thinking about your own thinking, being aware of when you're focused, when your attention is drifting, what triggers your distractions.
Becoming more self-aware about your own mental processes.
Exactly. And interventions based on metacognition, teaching students to monitor their own learning and attention, have shown some of the biggest positive effects on academic achievement. It's about noticing, oh, I'm drifting, and having a plan to refocus.
And related to that is self-regulated learning.
Yes. This involves skills like setting clear goals, making plans, managing your time effectively. One study had students monitor and reflect on their study habits, and it led to less procrastination and better self-regulation. It's about taking active control of the process.
So being more intentional and strategic about how you approach tasks. Okay, that makes sense. What about situational strategies? Changing the environment.
This is often very powerful because it reduces the need for that effortful willpower. Simple things like choosing where you work or study. A quiet library is going to be easier for focus than a noisy cafe.
Obvious, but probably underutilized.
Probably. Another technique is adding friction, making the tempting behavior just slightly harder to do.
Like hiding the cookies on a high shelf.
Exactly. Or in the digital world, maybe closing your laptop completely instead of just minimizing the social media tab. That small extra step forces a more conscious decision before you get distracted.
Turning off notifications. Putting the phone in another room.
Yes, those are classic examples. Using browser extensions or apps to block distracting websites during work hours. Creating screen-free zones or times.
Yeah.
All about making the temptation less accessible.
There's that study you mentioned by Duckworth about removing temptations.
Right. They specifically encourage students not to rely on willpower, but to use these kinds of situational strategies.
Yeah.
Muting phones, turning devices off, using blocking apps. And those students reported more success in reaching their goals compared to groups focused on willpower.
So proactively managing the environment seems key. It's not about being stronger. It's about being smarter in setting up your situation.
That's a great way to put it. And the most effective interventions often teach a combination of both cognitive strategies and situational strategies, giving people a full toolkit.
Are there specific programs or curricula that do this?
Yes, there are promising examples. HabitWise teaches habit formation skills for various life areas. The WOOP Tool Which Outcome Obstacle Plan is a framework for goal setting that incorporates anticipating and planning for difficulties.
Whoopee, okay.
There are also specific interventions designed to reduce internet addiction, particularly in schools, that teach these self-regulation techniques. And things like the Toolbox Project aim to teach kids the science of self-control early on.
Building those foundational skills young. That Seems crucial. This also makes you think about how we use technology in education generally, doesn't it?
It really does. There's often this push for more tech in schools, assuming tech savvy equals better learning. But given the potential for addiction and distraction, we need to be more critical. Is more tech always better? Does it automatically make better citizens or learners?
It's not a given. And you mentioned that striking fact about Silicon Valley execs.
Yeah, the irony that many people working at the heart of the tech industry choose low-tech schools for their own children. Schools without loads of computers or tablets, it suggests they see the potential downsides firsthand.
That speaks volumes. And it connects to this idea of the digital use divide. It's not just about access to tech anymore.
Right. It's also about how it's being used. And there's evidence that teens from lower income backgrounds spend significantly more time on screens daily compared to wealthier teens.
Which, if that screen time is often on these potentially addictive platforms, could worsen existing inequalities in terms of focus, well-being, and opportunities.
It's a serious concern. The disparities in use could be just as impactful, if not more so, than disparities in access.
Okay, so let's try to connect these threads now. We have the ethical problems with the design, driven by the business model, and we have the strategies for individual self-control. How do these relate to broader issues of business ethics and policy?
Well, the discussion really reinforces that design choices aren't just technical details. They are fundamentally business ethics issues. Like the Ford Pinto case showed years ago, an engineering decision driven by a cost-benefit analysis had huge ethical consequences.
And here, the design choices about infinite scroll or notifications or like buttons are often made by managers, guided by that attention economy incentive structure.
Exactly. So the harms of addiction aren't necessarily because individual engineers intend to cause harm, but because the system incentivizes designs that result in harm, prioritizing engagement metrics above all else.
It's a systemic issue stemming from the core business model. So what are the policy implications if the system itself is the problem?
That's the big question. Some thinkers, like Gerald Lanier or Cal Newport, propose fairly radical solutions, like essentially abandoning current social media until it fundamentally changes its incentive structure and empowers users more.
A complete reset. That's ambitious. Are there more immediate policy steps?
A key recommendation from the Bhargava and Velasquez piece is surprisingly simple, yet revealing. Require lower barriers to exit social media. Make it easier for people to leave.
Easier to leave. Why is that so important?
Because the difficulty of leaving tells you a lot about the platform's priorities. Take trying to deactivate or delete a Facebook account as they detail. It's incredibly complicated.
Oh, I've heard it's a nightmare. Like a maze.
It really is. Multiple menus, deep, confusing options. First, you have to find the right obscure settings page. Then choose between deactivate or delete, with deactivate pre-selected, nudging you towards the less permanent option.
Okay.
If you choose deactivate, they hit you with pictures of your friends saying they'll miss you. Pure emotional manipulation. Then you have to give a reason for leaving, and every reason triggers a pop-up trying to convince you to stay or solve the problem differently.
Like if you say, I spend too much time, they suggest managing notifications instead of actually leaving.
Exactly. It's designed to wear you down, to make you second-guess your decision at every turn. You have to opt out of emails, decline using Messenger. It's exhausting.
And then what happens?
If you finally click deactivate, logging back in even accidentally instantly reactivates the whole account. You have to start over.
Wow. And permanent deletion.
Even worse, you go through a similar process, then you're told it's scheduled for deletion in 30 days. But if you log in any time during those 30 days, the deletion is canceled and the clock restarts. You have to avoid the platform entirely for a month after deciding to leave.
That is deliberately obstructive.
Yeah.
It actively works against user choice and self-control.
Absolutely. It's a clear example of design choices reflecting the business model. Prioritize retention at all costs, even if it means trapping users who want to leave. Making it easier to exit would be a step towards respecting user autonomy.
So putting this all together, what's the final thought for someone listening, trying to make sense of their own relationship with these platforms?
I think the main takeaway is that the devices in our pockets, the apps we use daily, they aren't neutral tools. They are carefully engineered environments designed fundamentally to capture and sell our attention.
And the ethical weight isn't just on us, the users, to have superhuman willpower.
Right. There's a significant ethical responsibility on the companies building these platforms, whose business models often incentivize designs that can harm our well-being, our focus, even our basic human capabilities.
Which leads to a final question for you, the listener, to mull over. If these digital spaces are actively shaping our ability to control ourselves, to connect meaningfully, what's our role? Do we have a responsibility to push for change, to demand platforms that are designed for human flourishing, not just for engagement metrics?
It's a question about what kind of digital citizenship we want. What standards should we expect from the environments where we spend so much of our lives?
A powerful question indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on VSOW. We really hope this gave you some food for thought. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, like this deep dive if you found it valuable, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What's your take on the ethics of the attention economy?
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to VSOW.